My name is Emily Turner, 28 years old, living in Denver, Colorado. If anyone asked me what moment changed my entire life, I wouldn't hesitate to answer. It was that winter evening in the house I once called family. In a single moment, I understood what it meant to have everything stripped away: my home, my trust, and the love I naively thought would last forever. Outside the window, snow fell quietly, blanketing the small street. In the spacious kitchen of the Turner house, the warmth from the oven and the golden glow of the chandelier made the atmosphere seem cozy. But in reality, the air was thick, so heavy that even the slightest movement could shatter the fragile veneer hiding the tension. My mother, Margaret, sat at the head of the table, her back straight as a ruler, holding her knife and fork with the formality of a board meeting rather than a family dinner. My father, Richard, nodded quietly, his eyes fixed on his plate but his ears tuned to every word. My brother, Brian, 33, the golden child of the family, wore a half-smirk, ready with his usual barbs. And me? I sat across from them, trying to stay calm, but my heart was pounding like it wanted to burst out of my chest. I knew a storm was coming. Emily, my mother's voice cut through, sharp and cold. You're 28 years old enough to stop chasing useless dreams. We've discussed this countless times. Turner Events is the future of this family. Either you commit fully or... She paused, setting her fork down, her gaze piercing me like a blade. Or don't expect to be part of this family anymore. Her words hit like a hammer. I couldn't believe my ears. For 28 years, I'd endured endless criticism, comparisons, and pressure, but they'd never so bluntly denied my existence like this. My father said nothing, just gave a slight nod. His silence hurt more than any scolding. And Brian, my brother, let out a mocking chuckle. Oh, it's the screenwriter thing again, he shrugged. You tried, remember? That script you sent out that no studio even glanced at. You're living in a fantasy, Emily. Grown-ups have to make money. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to argue, to scream that I had the right to live for my passion, but my throat was tight. Every eye was on me, like spotlights on a criminal. Can't you say anything? My mother pressed, her voice sharp. I've built this company my entire life. Every client, every contract. Brian has proven himself. And you? Just scribbling nonsense and failing over and over? Enough. Either work for Turner Events or get out of this house. I looked up, my eyes blurry but my voice trembling. I can't give up my dream. Writing scripts. It's my life. Your life? My father finally spoke, his rare words heavy. You're embarrassing us, Emily. Enough. In that moment, I knew pleading was pointless. I stood, the chair scraping against the wooden floor with a harsh screech. If this is the only choice you're giving me, then I choose myself. No one responded, only Brian's mocking laugh. Good luck, wannabe screenwriter. I walked to the door, the sound of the lock turning behind me as cold as a final period. The key I'd carried since childhood suddenly felt useless, gripped tightly in my trembling hand. That night, I wandered through the snowy streets, dragging a small suitcase, finally stopping at a cheap motel on the outskirts. The narrow room, with its dim fluorescent light and musty smell, seared itself into my memory. I sat on the bed, opened my phone to check my bank account, and my heart plummeted. The balance was nearly zero. The emergency savings account I'd set up with Brian had been drained. The withdrawer, Brian Turner. I dropped the phone, sitting in silence. Everything had collapsed in a single day. My family rejected me, my brother betrayed me, my future was a blur. All I had left was my dream, to write. But was that dream enough to pull me back up? I know many of you may have felt the sting of being hurt by your own family, when the people you trusted most turned their backs. I'm sharing this story not for pity, but to ask, what would you do if you were pushed out of the place you once called home? If my story touches a corner of your own memories, please leave a comment. Maybe we'll find comfort in knowing we're not alone. And don't go anywhere, because in the next chapter, I'll tell you what saved me from despair. A surprising gift from my late grandmother that opened a door to freedom I never dared to dream of. Have you ever sat in a silent room but heard the echoes of old voices from your past? I lived that moment in that run-down Denver motel with only me and my battered old typewriter. And in that dim haze, the shadow of my grandmother, Grandma Eleanor, seemed to appear, guiding me back to the conflicted years of my childhood. From the time I was little, the phrase Turner Events was mentioned more often than my own name. To my parents, that event planning company wasn't just a job, it was a legacy, a source of pride, a reason for being. My mother, Margaret, always boasted about their high-profile contracts, lavish weddings, dazzling conferences, extravagant fundraisers. Every dinner, she'd list clients, revenue, and praise. My father, Richard, though quiet, showed his unwavering support with approving glances and silent nods. My brother, Brian, was the undisputed golden heir. He was praised for his charming smile, his knack for schmoozing clients, and his boundless ambition. Every time Brian appeared in a new suit, the family looked at him with pride. And me? I was just the dreamy, unrealistic daughter. I vividly remember being 12 when my mother first took me to a fancy wedding the company was handling. My job, fold napkins into swan shapes. While everyone bustled around, I sneaked a small notebook and pen, sat in a corner, and wrote an imagined dialogue between the bride and groom, daring to voice their true feelings instead of the polished vows spoken before the guests. I was lost in my world of words, oblivious to time, until my mother found me. She snatched the notebook, tore it in half in front of everyone, and snapped, "Emily, you're not here to play. This is the family's future. Learn to work." The ballroom stayed lively, but I stood frozen, my heart squeezed tight. Thankfully, I wasn't entirely alone. Grandma Eleanor, my mother's mother, was the only one who saw me not as a dreamer, but as a soul searching for her path. Every summer afternoon, she'd call me to her porch, where the late-day sun painted the windows gold. She'd set a stack of old VHS tapes in front of me, classic films she loved. We'd watch together and she'd ask, "Why do you think that character made that choice?" Or, "Could this scene have ended differently?" She taught me to analyze every glance, every line, every camera angle. And when I shyly showed her a short script, she didn't laugh. She smiled warmly. "You have a gift, Emily. Remember, you must live for your own story, not the one others write for you." Those words were etched into my heart, but life didn't let me linger in encouragement. 2 years ago, Grandma Eleanor passed away. At her funeral, amid the white wreaths, I felt like the world lost its only light. She left me her old typewriter, a relic no one else in the family wanted. To me, it was a treasure, proof of her belief in me. Holding that typewriter, I promised her I'd keep writing, no matter how much my family belittled or mocked me. I tried. After college, I joined a small film studio in Denver, working as an assistant on an indie project. For the first time, I felt I belonged, surrounded by people who lived and breathed art. I wrote at night, edited side scripts, hoping one day my name would appear on screen. But then the studio lost funding, and the project collapsed. I became unemployed, broke, and heavy-hearted. I dragged my suitcase back home thinking my family would at least comfort me. Instead, my mother sighed. "See? That's not a real life. Enough now. Join Turner Events." Brian laughed. "Welcome back to reality, Emily. Out here, people need results, not dreams." My father, as usual, stayed silent. But that silence was enough to kill the last shred of confidence in me. Now, in that moldy motel room, I clutched the typewriter like it was Grandma Eleanor's last warmth. Outside the window, snow fell thickly, streetlights blurring in the white haze. In my mind, her voice echoed clearer than ever. "You must live for your own story. Don't let anyone take it away, Emily." I closed my eyes, letting tears spill. Amid the humiliation, her words were the tiny flame keeping me from fading out. If you've ever had one person believe in you when the world denied you, you know the feeling I'm talking about. It's a priceless gift, but also a burden, because you don't want to let them down. I wondered, was I strong enough to keep going? To prove Grandma was right to believe in me? The road ahead was still foggy, but I sensed a turning point waiting. And I'll tell you what happened right after that dark night, a spark from the past that changed everything. If you find this story compelling, please comment why. If you think it's not engaging enough, be honest and comment N. I really want your feedback, because this story isn't just mine, it might shine a light on something in your own life. Have you ever received an email where just the subject line changed your heartbeat? I had that moment in that cheap Denver motel a week after being kicked out of my home. I was exhausted, money gone, hope at rock bottom, the world seemingly shut against me. But then, my phone screen lit up with a message. Urgent, regarding Eleanor Turner's trust. Contact immediately. I recognized the name instantly. Robert Kane, my grandmother's longtime lawyer. My hands shook so much I nearly dropped the phone. I opened the email, eyes racing over the words. Ms. Turner, please contact our office immediately. Per our records, Mrs. Eleanor Turner left a trust directly tied to your legal rights. We need to meet urgently. I froze. Eleanor, my beloved grandmother gone for 2 years, had left something for me? My heart trembled with fragile hope, like a candle reignited in the dark. The next morning, I walked into the law office in downtown Denver. The reception room was lined with dark wood, smelling faintly of old paper and coffee. Robert Kane, a calm man in his 50s, handed me a thick envelope and said slowly, Emily, your grandmother prepared for this moment long ago. I sat still, clutching the envelope, afraid to open it. Robert continued, this trust took effect upon her passing. It guarantees you 3 things. First, legal residency in the Turner home, regardless of your parents' wishes. Second, financial support to pursue your screenwriting career for years without worry. And finally, she left you a handwritten letter. My body felt like stone. I gripped the envelope, heart racing. A letter? Robert nodded, sliding the envelope closer. I opened it, seeing her familiar handwriting. My eyes blurred from the first lines. My dear Emily, I know you've been looked down on in your own home, but I believe you're stronger than they think. I created this trust to protect you from doubts, both from your family and yourself. Don't let anyone take your dream. You're stronger than all of them. I couldn't hold back tears. Her words were like an embrace. In that moment, I could almost hear her voice beside me. But the emotion quickly turned to anger as Robert explained further. There's another issue, Emily. After your grandmother's passing, your parents and brother were informed of the trust. Instead of complying, they ignored it. Worse, records show an unauthorized withdrawal, $150,000 from the trust, transferred directly to Turner Events. I was stunned. They knew? They knew all along and still kicked me out? Robert nodded, his eyes full of sympathy. I'm afraid they exploited temporary control to misappropriate funds. Now, with their public disownment of you, I have legal grounds to demand they restore your rights and account for everything. A chill ran down my spine. Not only had I been rejected, but my own family had betrayed me. That night, in the motel, I held my grandmother's letter. I remembered every mocking laugh from Brian, every cold stare from my mother, every complicit silence from my father. They didn't just doubt me, they trampled on the only person who ever protected me. I gripped the letter, whispering like a vow. Grandma, this time I won't let them take my dream. For the first time in years, a new feeling surged. Not fear, not surrender, but determination. If you want to hear more stories and struggles like mine and relate to them, you can find my previous videos on this channel. The next day, I met Robert again. He looked at me with a searching gaze. Are you ready, Emily? Facing your family won't be easy. There'll be tears, maybe more betrayal. But if you want, I'll stand by you to the end. I nodded, my voice shaky but firm. Let's do it. Arrange the legal meeting. It's time they face the truth. Robert gave a small smile, setting down a stack of documents. Good, I'll handle it. But remember, this battle isn't just on paper, it'll dig up old wounds, be prepared. I took a deep breath. Grandma Eleanor's voice echoed in my mind. You're stronger than their doubts. I knew I could do this. As I left the law office, Denver's winter sunlight hit my face. I closed my eyes, letting the light flood through my wet lashes. I felt an invisible hand guiding me, and I knew it was Grandma. I was no longer the outcast. I had legal weapons to reclaim justice and, more importantly, the spiritual strength from Grandma Eleanor's love. You've probably heard the saying, the moment you face the truth reveals people's true colors. I lived that moment in a quiet meeting room in a Denver skyscraper. The room was so silent that the ticking of the wall clock sounded like a soundtrack to the wordless battle about to begin. Across from me sat my parents and brother. Three familiar faces, yet so painfully distant. I once thought they loved me, but today they sat like defendants before Robert Kane, my only ally. Robert opened a thick file, his voice steady but firm. Mrs. Margaret, Mr. Richard, Mr. Bryan. These are the documents proving that $150,000 was illegally withdrawn from the trust Eleanor Turner established for Emily. He laid out bank statements, approval emails, and undeniable signatures. My mother, Margaret, gripped her purse tightly, her face flushed but her eyes still burning with control. She spoke in a high-pitched tone. "She doesn't deserve it. If she doesn't contribute to the company, what right does she have to that money?" I clenched my fists under the table, fighting to stay calm. As she finished, Bryan smirked and chimed in. "Exactly. Emily hasn't done anything but write trash scripts. They call that failure, sis. Failure." I looked straight at him. Each word stabbed my heart, but strangely, I didn't tremble anymore. I only felt pity. For him, for my mother. My father, Richard, as always, chose silence. But silence was no longer neutral. Robert flipped to the next page, pointing at a signature. "Here, Mr. Richard Turner approved the withdrawal. Please confirm." My father gave a slight nod, eyes averted, hands trembling faintly. I felt a lump in my throat. The man who once took me to the park had become an accomplice in stealing my only inheritance. My heart pounded. I knew it was time. I stood, my voice shaky but resolute. "I demand three things. First, the immediate transfer of the Denver apartment Grandma Eleanor designated in the trust. Second, I'll receive the creative grant she intended for me. And third, from today, this family has no control over the trust." The room fell silent. I looked at each face. My mother let out a scornful laugh, masking her unease. "You think you can survive without us? Don't be delusional, Emily. Without Turner Events, you're nothing." Bryan slammed the table. "You'll take that money and waste it. You'll fail again, and this time, no one's saving you." My father kept his head down, but his silence no longer unnerved me. It only proved one thing. He'd chosen their side. Robert cleared his throat, sliding the file toward me. "Emily is legally correct. The Turner family must transfer the assets as stipulated and account for the misused funds in the upcoming audit. Otherwise, legal consequences are unavoidable." I took a deep breath, looking at them. For the first time, I wasn't the child being forced into submission. I was an adult rewriting my fate. I don't need anyone's permission anymore. I'll live my life, not someone else's copy. In that moment, I saw my mother's eyes flicker with doubt. Bryan was speechless. My father closed his eyes as if admitting defeat. Robert handed me a pen. I trembled, not from fear, but from the strength I'd held back for years, finally breaking free. I signed my name, each stroke a declaration. I chose freedom. As I set the pen down, tears rolled down my cheeks. Not tears of weakness, but of cleansing, washing away years of humiliation. I looked up, a fierce yet relieved smile on my lips. Stepping out of the meeting room, Denver's winter sunlight hit my face, cold but bright. I stood still for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the air fill my chest. I was no longer the one cast out. I had opened the door to my own freedom, but I knew this was just the beginning. There would still be pain, unhealed wounds, and unavoidable confrontations. And one day, I'd face my domineering mother again, not with hatred, but with the compassion Grandma Eleanor taught me. Some encounters come unannounced, but have the power to shift your heart. That evening, in a small Denver theater, I experienced such a moment, one that taught me forgiveness doesn't need words, just a glance. After months of writing, revising, and filming, my first short film was complete. My small team, friends who believed in me when I was a nobody, decided to hold a premiere. The theater had just over 100 seats, modest but monumental to me. As I entered the lobby, I saw a long line of viewers, friends, colleagues, a few mentors from a talent program, and strangers drawn by curiosity. The chatter and congratulations made me both nervous and moved. For the first time, I wasn't an outsider. I belonged. As the theater lights dimmed, my heart raced. On the screen, the frames we'd built came to life. A story of a young woman breaking free from her controlling family to find herself. The audience was rapt. Some leaned forward, others nodded faintly. I sat among them, palms sweaty. But then something froze me. In the back row, in a shadowed corner, I saw a familiar figure. My mother, Margaret Turner. I was stunned. No one in my team knew she'd be there. I hadn't invited her. Yet there she was, sitting silently, hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the screen. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. But as the screen's light fell on her, I saw her face clearly, lines deeper than before, eyes not haughty but tense, weary. I tried to focus on the film, but my heart split in two, half anxious for the audience, half trembling at her presence. The film's climax arrived. The protagonist faced her family, shouting that she was no longer a puppet, that she'd live her own way. The theater fell silent. I heard heavy breathing from behind. As the heroine stepped into the light, leaving the oppressive house behind, I glanced back. My mother's hand covered her mouth. Tears streamed silently down her face. In that moment, I understood. The character wasn't just me, it was her, a woman who'd lived under control her whole life and unknowingly passed it on to her daughter. When the film ended, the room erupted in applause. My friends hugged me, cheering. I bowed in thanks, but my eyes stayed on the back row. My mother remained seated, shoulders trembling. She was alone amid the celebration, like an isolated island. I stepped into the lobby. The crowd poured out, congratulating, shaking hands, hugging. But through the throng, I saw her. She stood awkwardly, eyes red. She looked at me. In that moment, time stopped. My mother and I, two women, two generations, two worlds, locked eyes. No scolding, no tears of shame, no need for explanations. I gave a slight nod. A nod that said it all. I forgive you. She covered her mouth, nodding back faintly. She didn't approach or speak. She turned, walking slowly out of the theater. Her shoulders shook, but her steps were firm. I knew she'd been freed from the obsession she'd once imposed on me. I stood still, emotions swelling. I didn't need an apology or an embrace. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person's worth, it's for your own peace. That night, back in my small apartment, I sat at my desk. Grandma Eleanor's letter lay in the drawer, her slanted handwriting. "You're stronger than their doubts." I touched it, knowing I'd come a long way. They say when one door closes, another opens. But few mention the gap in between, when you stand before a slammed door, unable to see the new path. I stood in that gap for months, and from that fateful night in the theater, I knew I was ready to step forward and open my own door. The day I moved into my new apartment, Denver's sky was crystal clear. The place was modest, one bedroom, white walls, a window facing the distant Rockies. Not luxurious, but to me, it was proof of the freedom I'd reclaimed. I set Grandma Eleanor's old typewriter on my desk, next to her letter. Reading it again, I still shivered at her slanted words. "Don't let anyone take your dream. You're stronger than their doubts." Each word was a command, a reminder, a compass. I started writing again. No more hiding in my room, no more fearing my mother's knock or Brian's mocking laugh. Quiet nights, just me, my laptop, and Grandma's memory. My pen felt freer than ever, but I didn't want this journey to be mine alone. I remembered my childhood longing for someone to believe in me. I thought of kids out there, writing in the dark, dismissed as hopeless dreamers. So I decided to start a free screenwriting class for teens who love film. At first, only 4 high schoolers showed up. They were shy, hunched over, afraid to share their work. But I was patient. I told them about my torn notebooks, the doubts I'd carried, and I said, "You don't have to prove yourselves right away. Just be honest with your story, and time will take care of the rest." As classes passed, their eyes brightened, their voices grew clearer. A shy girl wrote about a single mother. A game-obsessed boy crafted a fantasy script. I realized giving others faith was another way to rewrite fate, not just mine, but theirs. Meanwhile, my short film was unexpectedly selected for a regional film festival. When I got the email, I cried. not for glory, but because my small dream had finally found a place on the cinematic map. I shared the news with my team, Levi, Tara, and others, who'd stayed up nights with me, eating instant noodles in makeshift studios. We hugged tightly. Tara laughed. Emily, you're not just a screenwriter anymore. You're proof anyone can rewrite their fate. I realized they were the family I'd chosen, not bound by blood, but by respect, encouragement, and belief, things I'd waited for my whole life. Then, one evening, while prepping lesson plans, I got a short text from an unknown number. I saw your film. Thank you for letting me see myself in it. I sat still. I didn't know how to respond. Maybe that was my mother's, Margaret's, only way of apologizing. I didn't write back or hold a grudge. I just smiled. Forgiveness doesn't need to linger. Sometimes a silent nod is enough, and I'd done that in the theater. When the festival screening ended, I stood on my apartment's balcony, gazing at the snow-capped Rockies. Denver's lights twinkled below. I thought back to that fateful dinner, the cheap motel, the tense legal meeting, the tearful premiere, and now this moment. I whispered to myself, Grandma, I did it. I lived for my own story. In my mind, her voice echoed, You're stronger than their doubts. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. Forgiveness had freed my mother, but more importantly, it freed me. I'd rewritten my fate, with my pen, my tears, my resolve, and the unwavering love of the grandmother who believed in me from the start. My story ends here, but the message I want to share goes beyond personal trials. I learned that no one defines your worth but you. Despite rejection, despite wounds from loved ones, I could rise because my grandmother's love and faith lit my path. Forgiveness isn't about others' worth, it's about your peace. And when I learned to forgive, I became truly free. I also realized family isn't just blood, it's the companions who see and believe in you. When you dare to live for your dream, you'll meet those ready to walk beside you. If you've ever felt small, doubted, or denied, please remember, you're strong enough to rewrite your fate. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story resonates, please leave a comment, like, and follow my channel for more human stories.